How long do we have, Rob?
My name is Robbie Luckett. I'm director of the Margaret Walker Center and professor of history at Jackson State University. Today is September the 15th, 2021. It's approximately 10:11 a.m. Central Time. I'm here with Dion Brown. Dion, for the purposes of our record, will you state your full name and spell it for us?
Dion Brown, D-I-O-N, and Brown is B-R-O-W-N.
Do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, sir.
Let's begin with some biographical background. Can you tell me about where you're from, how you grew up, a little bit about your family, your educational background, those kinds of things?
Sure. I'm Dion Brown again. I'm from Decatur, Illinois. Central Illinois, directly about 30 miles from Springfield, the capital of Illinois. Grew up on the inner city, inner city, suffice to say, graduated and wanted to get away from that environment. So what I did is I joined the military, went in the Air Force, and spent about 21 years. And then I retired before I started my career in museums. So went to school while in the military. I got my undergrad in HR development, and then went and got my master's degree, my graduate degree in leadership, which is now organizational development. So those fit. I like the leadership because it really, between HR and leadership and the military training, it just prepares you. Unbeknownst to me, it prepared me for a career in museums.
I was going to ask you how your experience in the military led you to the museum field. Was there something specific about it, or did it kind of happen by circumstance and happenstance?
It was really freaky, Robbie. What happened? Most of my career, when I wasn't deploying, I always worked part-time jobs because I knew the career in the military would come to an end. So I took different jobs. I was an operations manager at Hertz. I've done delivering pizzas. I just wanted to get out there and see what the civilian force was like. And so when fast forward to retiring, so when I first retired from the military, had my undergrad degree, but I loved working for Hertz. I was, operations manager. I was traveling. I was making a difference in the world. But after about 5 years, I decided to see what my HR degree would do for me. And it's funny, I had a choice to go work for the aircraft companies in Wichita, Kansas, or this museum that I interviewed the same day, about an hour in between them. They both extended an offer to me. And I said, wait a minute, my buddies work for the aircraft company and they have so many layoffs and turnover. The museum is a laid back, kick back environment. So I chose the museum. And I was an HR manager at a museum called the Exploration Place in Wichita, Kansas, a science and technology museum. And I started there in October of 2005. 6 months later, we get a new president. And 3 months after that, he said to me, you have what it takes to be a president, and I'm going to teach you everything I know. And I said, whoa. All I want to do, I've been in military deployment. I just want to go to work, do HR, which I love doing because HR is helping people. Go home and sit in my garage and drink my beer and enjoy retirement life from the military. Well, God had bigger plans because that's the projection that took me into really understanding museums and the impact we have on the community outside of the four walls of your museum. And that's how I got into museums and built a very nice career and over these past, 15, 16 years.
And how long were you at the Exploration Museum in Wichita, and did you take other positions at that museum?
Oh yeah, I was there I stayed there 5 years, Robbie, and I started as an HR manager. And then he wanted me over earned income operations because now he's at the point he wants to show me every facet of the museum and how it integrates into the bigger picture. So I wanted to keep my HR title. So what he did, because if this didn't work out in museums, at least if I had the title, it shows progression if I stayed in the HR field. So what he did is made me the director of HR and earned income operations. Man, in that capacity, our membership spiked, our cafe sales went up. 1 year we were doing 22,000 profit. The following year we did 122,000. And so it showed it's just being an entrepreneur. And with that success, he said, okay, let's try you over in another department. I moved to development. So then I became director of development with no training. He sent me to IUPUI School of Philanthropy. And after months, I got my certificate of fundraising over at IUPUI. And I said, but boss, this is very important. I tell people this all the time. I said, boss, I'm no fundraiser. I don't know anything about it. He said, I don't expect you to go out and raise funds. But what I'm doing is I'm preparing you for when you become a president, your development director can't blow smoke up your butt. You'll know what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm telling you, Robbie, that has paid so many dividends on being able to understand and talk that language as an ED or president. And actually now in fundraising, I love doing it because it's not going out asking people necessarily for money. It's about relationship building and having a passion for the work that you do. If you have a passion for the work that you do, it's going to come out when you're talking to anybody. And from that, I mean, most recently, when I was the president of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center over in Cincinnati, I met this gentleman. He didn't want to come by and talk to me. And so, good guy. So he came by and talked, and it was just a meeting, nothing, no agenda, anything. He just wanted to see how I was doing. He was a big player in the city, came by and we talked about a good hour, hour and a half. And at the end, Robbie, he said, Dion, here's a check for $15,000. Myself and our foundation, I didn't even know he had a foundation. We will get behind this museum and you'll see a lot more of them. And it just came from a general conversation. It wasn't an ask, and as an ED, you cultivate none of that. It was just, he sent me at an event and said, man, let me come by and talk to you and see the museum. And it worked.
I'm glad you mentioned that importance of relationship building, because so much of it is about that, right? And how much that can push the work that you do in a museum, whatever your position is, just having strong relationships is really key. So what led you to leave Wichita?
A recruiter contacted me and asked me, would I be interested in going out to Vegas and opening up the Museum of Organized Crime, Law Enforcement Organized Crime, something like that. It's out in Vegas. And I said, sure. Because my boss, the president who brought me in, he was retiring. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll at least go talk about it. And went out there. I didn't get it, but that recruiter was impressed enough that a position came up. And 3 months later, he called and asked me, would I be interested in going to work for B.B. King at his museum? And I said, yeah, Memphis. He said, no, Mississippi. I said, no, thank you. And, I tell you what, though, at the time, I was the chief operating officer at Exploration Place. So my final position at Exploration Place was chief operating officer. And so to go to the B.B. King Museum, we went back and forth and that was in September. And by November, he says, man, would you just go down, think of it as a vacation? And I said, Mississippi and vacation doesn't fit in the same sentence for me. Anyway, my wife and I agreed to go down. We went down, Thanksgiving was on that Thursday. So we left that Sunday, headed to Mississippi. Robbie, I tell you, when I crossed over into Mississippi from Arkansas, fell in love. That was November, man. So, still decent weather, but the sea, I don't know what it was about that Delta, but fell in love with it. And the best thing, probably professionally, one of the best things I've done professionally is to go to the Delta. And I told my wife after the first day of interviews, if they have me, I'm taking this. And it worked out. And they offered it. And that was like I said, professionally and personally, that's one of the best jobs I ever had in my life.
So that was 2010?
Yes. And that's the other thing, Robbie. I tell people, people say, how do you do this? And I said, one, here goes that military. I'm used to moving around. So it's not hard. And what has helped me is the willingness to travel for a job. So I didn't get locked into one area, waiting on somebody to leave or waiting on this position over here open. For me in my career, I knew from the military that in order to move up, you may have to take a step back, sideways, or whatever to get to your end game. I thought taking the job in Mississippi would be taking a step back to propel me to the next, and found out it was what launched me into what I do now. And had it not been for that museum, I wouldn't be probably talking to you, or, some people say my reputation wouldn't be what it was had I not did that job down there in Mississippi and had a great team. I didn't do anything. The team did it all, and we moved on from there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the B.B. King Museum and what you did there. What was your work like there? What were some of your biggest accomplishments?
Oh man, one of the biggest ones that I personally take is I learned the blues. So I mean that, and I'm a huge fan now. I knew nothing about the blues. My family didn't listen to it, so all I knew is I was going to run this organization. And I remember my within the first week, my operational guy Robert Terrell, we're over at Club Ebony. He said, "So, you know who's playing in the background, don't you?" And I said, "No." He whispered in my ear and said, "You might want to learn that. That's your boss. That's B.B. King." That's the day I became a fan. I read every book on B.B. I could get my hands on through conversations with people in the community, listen to the music, and become a big fan. So that's one, I learned to appreciate the music. Two, at the time when I got there, everything on the museum was on loan to the museum from B.B. King. Within 6 months of him seeing the work that we were starting to turn and do in the community and as a whole, Laverne contacted me and said, "Hey, Mr. King would like to know if you all would like everything signed over to you." Long story short, everything in the museum was signed over to us. All the artifacts, documents, you name it, that became our property. So to be able to pull that off, and then also during my watch, we worked on getting his cars. So now BB King the museum just went through an expansion. We started that by getting the vehicles, his El Camino, his Rolls Royce, and his tour bus. So they're on, we got those back in 2011, early 11, maybe early 12, and just added up but then our programming that we did a team mentoring program that's still going on called BB's Bridge Building Ambassadors. And we partnered with the Holocaust Museum in DC. And so that right there, that's a great accomplishment because now we're impacting the community. Our camps that we expanded on, they used to just be twice a year, summer camp and spring camp. We turned it into a year-long program. We won awards from Michelle Obama we was the first African-American museum and the third museum to be acknowledged by her for her Get Fit program. I believe it's called Get Fit. And it's because of our camps, what we were doing. So the team we had built down there, man, they did incredible work. Couldn't have did none of it, wouldn't have done none of it without them. And I mean, everybody, and we became such a family. I mean, the kids, the health and wellness checks, that's another, man. Our museum was so impactful, not just for the Kings, but the Get Fit and the exercise program, to the point where we started doing monthly seminars for the senior citizens, 55, for seniors 55 and older. It became a hit, man. We started having sponsors get on behind us. People who normally wouldn't contribute to the BB King Museum, they started contributing because they saw the benefit of getting their information out, the health and wellness out to people. So we did a lot of good stuff down there.
A follow-up question. You mentioned Club Ebony.
Yeah.
Could you describe what the relationship of Club Ebony is to the BB King Museum?
Yes. So there's another gift of Mr. King. At the same time we were acquiring his vehicles, he owned Club Ebony, but another person in Indianola oversaw it. Another individual. Well, he asked, "How would you guys feel about having Club Ebony?" And of course, we wanted it because we saw the potential of it being connected to the museum. If we bring it under our umbrella, and so he donated the museum. I mean, the Club Ebony to it. It's the oldest, and you guys know this way better than me. It's one of the, I won't say it's the oldest, one of the oldest juke joints, still standing juke joints in Mississippi, or at least in the Delta, if not country, do live performances. And what we were able to do, Robbie, Alan Hammonds in Greenwood, Mississippi, he had pictures, and he and others had pictures of how it looked back in its heyday. I think from Mr. Johnny Jones, I believe his name was the original, the owner. And so we decked it out with that era, tables, chairs. We even peeled back paneling, and we found the original glass walls still in. So we left those up and highlighted them, cleaned it up. Funny story about that, gifts from Mr. King. He gave us his bus and Club Ebony. Well, the bus, we already invested $100,000 to get it up and running, and it's still not running. Well, when he gave us Club Ebony, it started costing money from the electrical. It was horribly wired. I mean, we just had to put a lot of money into it. And then so I remember talking to Miss Tony, and I don't know if Mr. King was on the call or in the person that day, but I said, we don't want any more gifts because your gifts are expensive. You know, we were spending, because I brought it up because I was asking for some money, you know, as a donation. And I was telling about, man, these gifts are great, but man, it's getting a little expensive to accept gifts. So and from my understanding now and talking to the B.B. King Museum, they're in the process of doing some great work over there on remodeling it even more.
Yeah, they're doing some great work there. I'm wondering, you know, I'm having these conversations with a lot of people, you know, who work in really wonderful museums, and they almost exclusively are in pretty major metropolitan areas, right? They're in St. Louis or Chicago or Washington, D.C. or Cincinnati. What is it like to run and maintain a major world-class museum in Indianola, Mississippi?
Actually, it all comes down to programming. We don't get, I mean, our traffic, foot traffic, when I was there anyway, we would get about 35,000 people a year. That 35,000 people means everybody that walked into the building, regardless if they was using the bathroom, we just counted. But if you look at our actual numbers, it was probably more like 22 to 25,000 people. So fundraising is primarily a lot, but you got to have great in any museum, regardless of your budget size. In my belief, is your programming that you put on is your key to fundraising. If you don't have a product, because they wouldn't give it to the B.B. King Museum to get a B.B. King Museum. They were giving it to us because of the work we were doing in the community or inside. So it's hard, but you have to tap into the community. I'll never forget when I first got to Mississippi, and I'm the president, I'm the ED. I walk around with a jacket and tie on, and I noticed people wouldn't talk to me within the community until I went to a meeting and everybody had on khakis and polos and stuff. The day I changed my dress is the day the community started accepting me, because now I'm on their level. He's not the president of the B.B. King Museum. But, you know, you got to have effective programming and partners. We partnered everywhere. B.B. King Museum, we had it good because of the name. And so the state actually did a lot of our advertising. I mean, so when I first got there, we were spending probably $85,000 in marketing, but we were only bringing in $35,000 in revenue. That didn't match. So I couldn't do it immediately, so I knocked off $10,000 a year. My board chair understood what I was doing, and when he realized how effective it was, we cut it down over half, and then the money we did, we didn't necessarily target Mississippi because tourism was doing a great enough job, so we took that money and invested overseas to bring more people from Europe, which it worked. So So it's a family, even though it's a small rural, 12,000 people, maybe 10,000 people. But because of that museum and partnering, when I was there, at least seven restaurants opened. The museum played into the community, bringing business to them. Even with 30,000 people, that's triple the size of the city. So the revenue, which was great also because the forefathers, the Bill McPherson and the Allen Hammonds, they did a deal where we got some of the tourism taxes because we were it. So that was a $300,000 check we got, every year from hotels and food. So it was big. So even in the major city, like here in St. Louis, same footprint, fundraising, programming, and having the track record of building a team. Because Robbie, you could have all these ideas, but if you don't have a great team, so we start out, well, every museum I go to, I meet with everybody on the staff, community board, but specifically on the staff to get an idea of who we are and what we are and what they're doing. And over time, you can mold that into your vision to move forward. And I've been blessed to have some great teams. May not start out with them, but we end with them that do some dynamite programming. They get it. I probably make them mad because I come up with so many ideas, but man, they get after it. And actually, to give you an example, Robbie, in a major city, I'll use Cincinnati. I had an idea because I'm always in that fundraising entrepreneur spirit. And John Pepper, who he used to be the president, CEO of Procter & Gamble. He's donated tons of millions of his own money, well over $20 million of his own money to that museum. We were talking one day and we brought back this exhibit Mandela that we curated that was a traveler. And I said, for his 100th birthday, we ought to do a documentary and capture the opening. Long story short, we did. And the results of it is this right here. We won this, and you can see my name, it's the real deal. But we won this, Robbie. And what we did is took it and used it as a fundraising because that documentary is really to be taught in schools because the craziness, the movie Black Panther is tailored after Mandela. From the language to, there's quite a few similarities in it. So that's where you have to think outside the box and have a great team to raise funds. And we were able to raise money off of that also, sponsorships.
Would you tell us specifically what that award is so that people know?
Oh, it's an Emmy. Get it all the way in the screen. Yes. Zoe Wesson, who's a good friend of mine, he's won like 35 Emmys. So that was a treat, man. And it was crazy at that ceremony, Robbie. I was executive producer on it. Jackie Dace, who she was there. She was a producer of some sort. Zoe, and we're sitting there, and they're announcing the winners, right? When it comes to our category, and they sit us all the way in the back of this auditorium by the kitchen. So we said we ain't got a chance in hell, man. When they called our name, I sprinted from the back to the front, man. Couldn't believe it.
One more question about BB King and your experience there. I don't know that many people realize that Mr. King is interred at the museum.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you when he was laying in rest at the museum. What was that experience like? Because that's a very different kind of thing for a museum professional to be involved in.
Eric, that was I didn't know it at the time, and it affected me afterwards, but I was here in St. Louis doing transitioning from BB King to the National Blues Museum. And we knew he was getting ill. I had been on the phone, but we didn't know that bad. And so I remember Robert Terrell, I believe, he called me like at 1:00 in the morning and said, "Hey, Mr. King passed. We need you back here." No, that was the board chairman who called me. Got on the phone with Delta, they hooked me up, got back at 10:00 in the morning in Jackson, and So my charge, myself and two others were charged. I'm sorry, my yard is being cut right now, but if you can, I'll try and talk over it. But myself, the church, and the funeral director, we were charged with planning Mr. King's funeral. But it was pretty well written for us because he left how he wanted it done through a song. Please keep my grave clean. So what we did, so that's how we planned it. But man, the amount of people, it was stressful. Interviews out the yin yang, but that's how powerful that man was. And to have him lay in state at the museum, we drew more people than in Las Vegas, where they first, have a viewing of Mr. King, brought him back to the Delta where he wanted to be buried at in his hometown. So, to organize that, man, the amount of security, the amount of work that was done behind the scenes was incredible. And one of if it's such a highlight, well, the whole thing is just, I'll never forget. I remember I told him, at 3:00 on this Saturday, after we buried Mr. King, I'm done, and Malika is the new interim. And from 3:00 on, she has it. Well, it stormed that day in Indianola. So the time, and we had him mounted on horses. Well, we had horses carrying Lucille's, a black and a white horse, leading him from the church to the museum where we were his final resting spot. So I'll never forget. So I'm out my jacket, my tie is off, and the funeral director to pull all the way in. He gets out and he says, here. And I said, wait a minute, I told you I'm done at 3:00. He said, no, you're going to do the ceremonial dig with the silver spade that he talks about in the song. Man, blew me away. It was just the whole BB King organization is one big family. Brother, let me tell you this. So when we get ready to put him on his public viewing, when we take Mr. King out of the hearse, the family said, you get in front and lead him into your museum. When we got ready to take him back to the hearse at the end of the viewing, I was back in my office, wore out. And all of a sudden I keep hearing people say, where's he at? Where's Dion? Where's Dion? I go back. They said, we need you to walk into the car. Getting to the hearse, I get out of the way so they can load him in. And then they come and say, close the door on Mr. King. I mean, dude, I'm getting emotional just talking about it. But it's one big family, man. It was crazy. In a good way.
I will just note from my own personal experience being there, one of the most remarkable sights was 2 Mississippi Highway patrolmen standing honor guard at his casket. I can't imagine that as a child growing up in the Mississippi Delta, he'd ever imagined something like that happening.
Yeah. It was very well done. The whole, from Mr. King's team to our team at the museum, the state police, the city. Well done.
So you obviously transitioned from the BB King Museum. And you mentioned Malika Polk Lee. And I know succession planning is something that is important to you. I wonder if you might say something about that and about what led you to the National Blues Museum and kind of the rest of your career post BB King.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm big in succession planning, and I'm sure that comes from the military because you're training the next one, because in the military you're only there for 3 years or less, so you got to be ready to keep moving on. So I'm a firm believer in it. From Malika, I did some succession planning at Exploration Place, but Malika is where I had a real influence. So Malika comes and work, and she got the accounting. She has that hands down, but she comes from Uncle Ben's, and so she comes from a operations background. So she had to show it on her own that she had the initiative. And once she showed it, I told her, hey, you got what it takes. So I'm gonna do everything I can to prepare you, to teach you what I have. So when I do leave, because I will leave, you'll be ready to be the next president, or it won't miss a beat. And but let me back. And so she took it and moved forward. But I'll tell you two examples of people. And Malika has went on to do great things. I remember her calling me and said, Mr. Brown, they still call me you, or they call looking for you. I said, Malika, what you have to do is you're just maintaining. It will officially become your museum when you come up with one program on your own and then implement, because then now it shows you've taken over. And she's done so much now. It's crazy. And I remember talking to the board chair. There was some reservation if she was the right person. You know, the board was split down the middle, maybe. And she was my recommendation. And the board said, okay, we'll do it as an interim. After 3 months, they gave her the full term because they saw what she was, because I'm out of the way. And they see that it's not Dion running, it's Malika. So it was a great move. But at the same time, I've had a person in the Delta and Jackie days. I ask people, I think if I see it in you, I say, hey, you ever thought about being executive director or / president? And they, of course, everybody says yes, but when you start mentoring and showing them the work, they kind of see, they still think they want it. But what happens is if they don't show the interest, after I said, I'm taking you under my wing, I'm gonna show you what I know, and then you hopefully get a position or whatever. One took it, and actually a very good friend of mine, Dr. Bennett, said, I don't have that desire. Thanks, but I don't have the desire, which was great. I know she had it, she just didn't want it. Jackie, on the other hand, wanted it. And actually she was my deputy at the National Blues Museum. And then she's one of two people that went to the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center with me in Cincinnati. And she was my deputy there. And now she's an executive director here in St. Louis at St. Louis Artworks. Point behind that, everybody is not executive director / president, and everybody may not want to do it. Just because I think they may not want those positions. Some people, like myself, I didn't think I wanted, but I'd rather be pushed and challenged and go to work and do the same thing over and over. And that's why I went the route I did. Dr. Bennett loved curating. She loves her history. And that's what she's shining at. But yeah, so after I left the B.B. King Museum, I've been looking for about a year off and on different potential jobs I would like to apply for. And long story short, I wanted to open a museum, and the National Blues Museum gave me that opportunity. I never will forget my mentor, what he told me: be careful on opening a museum, because once you open it, you can start to clock down that you probably got a good 1.5 years left. I said, what do you mean? He said, because you're burnt out from all the work it takes. The board, you're burnt out with the board is burnt out with you. And it'd be time for somebody that's taking an open institution to take it to the next level. And he was absolutely right, because it's a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of frustrations to get a museum open. And the National Blues Museum did great. Robbie, our first year open, we did over 100,000 on $1 million budget, $800,000 we did on earned income. 80%, and that's crazy. And we built great programming. We went outside of our walls. Again, great team. I got to build it from scratch because I was the only one there. And we only had 7 people total by the time we opened. And I didn't hire my first hire until July. I started in June. I hired my new hire, Casey Jolly, in July. I didn't hire nobody else till probably December. It was just the 2 of us, and we killed it. Yeah. And from there I went on. And then here, we were at a high, but here goes my boss, my mentor. 2 years in, you're gonna be gone because it's time for somebody new. And I wasn't even looking for a job. Actually, I was enjoying the National Blues Museum and our success. And I was drinking coffee one Saturday, and my cousin was drinking with me. She said, you ought to look at this job in Cincinnati. I said, what is it? She told me. I said, nah, not really looking. I'm happy. Plus, being on the board, you hear about every institution. So you pretty much know what's going on in any African-American museum. But I started reading up on it, man, and the bug got me. I ain't gonna lie. And I put in for it, and thank God I got it. Man, again, each place has turned around thanks to the teams that we build, because it wasn't accepted, even though National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, it just wasn't really accepted by the community, African American community, which same way as the B.B. King Museum, you have whites thinking it's a black museum, you got blacks thinking it's a white museum. So as a president, what you have to do, you have to be out in public and you have to tear down those walls in every community. And you do that by your programming, your personal appearances at different things, so people get to know you. And then they're still gonna wait and watch, but our programming, it turned a corner. We had donors that once I got there, literally asked me, Dion, how much money do you want? I don't have much, but what do you want? Because of the programming. I'm serious. And I said, that would be naive of me. How about you tell me what the museum can do for you? He said, I had to think about that one because nobody's ever asked what they could do for me. Long story short, that was a $180,000 gift he gave us because he wanted us to replace all of our AV equipment. I mean, that was 6 months later, here it is. So we did a program. I don't know if you guys remember when, what's his name? That Smollett guy up in Chicago said he was fake this thing.
Jesse Smollett.
Yep. So this is how crazy my programming goes, Robbie. And this is why I keep saying the success comes from your programming. I'm sitting there in a steering committee meeting, and here we go, black, white. This is Cincinnati. And the whites say, your Black museum will not do a program on the LGBTQ community. Black board member says, well, and they get into this him haul. After about 3 minutes, says, excuse me, as the president of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, I personally can't do them because that's not my cup of tea. I don't know it. I won't be factually correct. But if somebody from that community came and with a program that aligned with our mission, 100% will do it. Or you'll get rid of me. And I'm serious when I say this. The very next day, I was telling this lady this in a meeting, and her eyes got this big. And I said, what? She said, I'm your gay queen you can use. Seriously, we put on that program, man, 300 people from somebody as far away from Birmingham, Alabama, came to the museum for that event. We got a board member out, we got donations. That wasn't the reason we're doing it. We're doing it because it was an important issue going on about bullying and how people from that community are discriminated. We did a thing on teen bullying with the Jewish community, the Blacks. And that program, my staff was sitting there and I'm watching on the news, all these teen bullying cases. So I told the staff, this is like the end of July. And I told my team before school starts, I want a teen bullying summit with nothing but students on the panel, students in the audience, and the superintendents, no adults at all. Because the way you make it change is the superintendent sees the hurt and the pain these kids are going through. They're the one that can make the decisions for those teachers, for those schools. And that's what we did, which spurred off to 2 other programs within the community that they took our program and ran with. See, that's the beauty of working in museums, Robbie. It's not just, it's what you get to do to impact. And I tell people this all the time, it's how you can take your institution and be an impact in the community. That's what it really comes, because we're not gonna get rich at it. You make a good living, don't get me wrong. You make a great living, you're not gonna be rich. But man, as a president or / executive director, for me, I've been able to take our museums and go into the community and do programming or bring it to the museum, and that brings everybody together. And I also do it all through music too.
So there's so much I want to talk to you about, but we're running out of time. Could you just, I do want us to talk for a minute about the Association of African-American Museums, but just tell us about what you've been doing since leaving the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center and what you do today on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Robbie. Yeah, I do consulting. I work with an organization company called Nimble Strategies. Started working there probably a little over May of 2020, I believe it was. March of 2020, I'm sorry. Started working there, and what we do, my actual title is Managing Director of I got a card right here, Managing Director of Nonprofit Services. And so what I do, is we do consulting from strategic plans to I've sat in as an interim executive director of organizations who's going through transitions in leadership, or they either getting ready to term somebody or their ED or president leaves unexpectedly. So for the nonprofit side of the house, I go in and at this one, I was executive director for 6 months. And during that time, I looked over their books. I gave them rooms, areas to improve on. At the same time, help them find their next executive director. So that was one client. Another client we're working with now, speaking of the association, is the America's Black Holocaust Museum. I'm sorry, I went blank all of a sudden. Up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is a museum founded by Dr. James Cameron. He was the first or the only known survivor of a lynching, public lynching, and he opened the American Black Holocaust Museum. Since then, Dr. Burt Davis, who is a board member for AAAM, he is the ED. We did a strategic plan for him over the winter months, and then they engaged us to help them re-emerge grand opening, do their reemergence. And so we're working with them right now and we're gonna, can't say the date, but it's gonna be coming up pretty soon. We're gonna do a press release in this month. And so we're doing everything from the business plan to the event, how the whole structure goes on Open Museum. My partner, Eric, he works on the for-profit side. We both go back and forth, but on the for-profit side, what we've been seeing a lot of increase in business is companies going out of business and they go into a receivership. And we go in and when the courts have to get involved, then we get assigned to go take over their business for the following year, 6 months to a year while they hash it out in court. Well, we do a lot. And for the association, I thank God, Eric Marcheski, our CEO, believes in me and the work that I've done so far with the Association of African-American Museums, that once a year now, part of our give back is to go out and do at least one, if not two strategic plans for members of the Association of African-American Museums. They submit and then we select one and we go do a strategic plan, because strategic plans, I mean, they can go from 35,000. I mean, the one I paid for was 35, and I've heard people say they paid over 200,000 for one. So even on the low end at 35,000, a lot of the African-American museums, $35,000 is going to take a grant or find some place to find that kind of money to do one. So we did it for American Black Holocaust Museum this year. We were supposed to do the new museum out in Charleston, but they were about to make their hire and they didn't want to put it, so we didn't do it. They didn't want to commit and then the new president have a different idea of when they want it done. So we went ahead and just did ABHE.
So we only have a few minutes left before I know you need to go, but can you tell us about your history with the Association of African-American Museums, your relationship to the organization, and specifically your relationship to people from AAAM who impacted you in this field?
Well, by far, the most influential person of the association is, everybody in the field knows her, it's Dr. Deborah Mack. She's done it all from consulting to her positions in museums and even internationally. Dr. Mack has pushed me into so many different areas out of my comfort zone to help out here or help out this. She's the one that recruited me to the board, and it took me to do the work, but had it not been for Dr. Mack, she would have never put me out. I would have never been out on the vision of so many others. So she recruited me on the board, but had it not been for her, a lot of the opportunities that I had, I wouldn't have got, because Dr. Mack, she talked me up everywhere she went. And I tell her and tease her about that all the time. I told her I still owe her a commission check. But the history, I was on the board. I came on the board actually in 2011. Unofficially, Dr. Mack wanted me at the meetings, and then officially came on in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and just turned out this past August. Great. Far as that goes, one of my success stories is being part of the committee to select our first paid executive director, Vedette Coleman, and she has done such a phenomenal phenomenal job. She has taken our organization to a level that I didn't even imagine. She's a rock star. She even, I just saw that we clipped 1,000 members. And I remember me giving her a hard time. She was so happy when we got to 500. I said, that's not 1,000. And so behind the scenes, we're texting, so I keep pushing it. So when we hit 1,000, so I remember we got to 900. We're almost there. No, we're not. No, we're not. And I said, you think you can get it for the end of the year? Bottom line, she did incredible work. Association, and the vision and where the association is going under her vision and her leadership, and the board is so strong right now. But see, we didn't start there. When there's been such a transition, I got to be on the tail end of the old guard, then me, and now the new guard is taking on. And to see that transition, it's really incredible. Just the mindset of people, of the old guard versus the transition to me, and I got to, transcend to it's two areas, two different thoughts. And that's why there may have been some pushback on our selection when we were going through the selection process, because the old guard still had a heavy influence on the transition, and now we're to the new guard. And so it was really a dynamic thing, but I'm glad we came to the decision that we did and select Vedette. I mean, they all would have been great, but what Vedette has done is just unbelievable. I encourage all your classmates to just go to our webpage, Robbie, association, and just poke around. If they're not members, just poke around and see how much information and how many resources and tools we have.
You mentioned Vedette. Yeah, you mentioned Vedette Coleman Robinson and her vision for this organization. Last question. What's your vision for the future of the field, and what recommendations would you have for my students and others who want to enter the field? So your vision for the future and recommendations.
So my vision for the future is if they go together. My vision is for people like me. For your class, I'll tell you age, I'm 57. So I just talked about the old guard, then I was me, and then we transitioned to the new guard. As I told Vedette, I am here for the association in any capacity you need me. But if we're getting to the age where us 55 who are now becoming seniors, it's time to get that new guard in, train them up, which your class is. It's time to start mentoring and giving back and mentoring to them, because those are our forward-thinking leaders. But we got to get in and pay our dues. You can't just come in and be the president. You got to pay your dues and work hard and stand out. Don't fall for that cliche, never volunteer for something because they'll always come to you. Well, that's what I want. I want you to come to me, because as I'm volunteering, yeah, it may be a menial job, but it's a job I now know. So I'm gonna keep on adding that to my tool set. The vision is for us to continue to grow, Robbie. With Vedette, I would like to see us to be a granting organization. So like those strategic plans that we say that cost $35,000, for us to be able to help out financially to these other organizations, because we're at a disadvantage monetary with our resources. So let's balance that out. And Vedette is doing such a great job on fundraising as much as anything else. But hopefully we can start helping these smaller institutions raise them up and build up their confidence. I also talked to Vedette about this, and you and I may have. We really need to look at how many museums we're opening, meaning that everybody who has a story doesn't necessarily mean you need a museum. There's I can think of 4 different institutions that should collaborate and become one. They're working on a $20,000 budget with no paid staff or anything. It's just ways you can do it. But my vision is for us to grow even stronger, and we're dabbling into the international waters. Under Vedette and you guys as leadership, Robbie, the sky's the limit for us. And let me close out by saying, so what I was saying, it's time for me to take a step back. So I love consulting. I may eventually go back to a museum, but I don't think I'm executive director, president material, because it's time to get ideas like Robbie's. It's time to get those people who have seasoned and paved the way and paid their dues. It's time to put them in leadership positions. So I love coaching. Yeah, it's just time. I mean, in everything, we age ourselves out and a new breed comes in. But I miss it. The one thing I can say I miss about museums the most is the impact you have on the community. That's what I miss the most, the people and the impact you have on the community.
Well, Dion Brown, thank you for joining us today and being a part of this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, my man. I'll get this over to you today.